34 Harvard student organizations signed this letter. And I'm like, what is going on?
Bill Ackman, who I think we've shown you one or two videos of in the last couple of months, has been a lifelong lefty tech guy. And he's had a massive, massive awakening post October 7th. He was on the Lex Friedman Podcast talking about how he is now realizing that Harvard and DEI and wokeness and the entire progressive movement are an evil disaster.
I think this reveals a deeper problem in terms of ideology and the governance of Harvard, maybe the culture of Harvard.
Yes. So on governance, the governance structure is a disaster. On ideology, I was like, how can this be? October 7th, the event that woke me up was 30 student organizations came out with a public letter on October 8th, literally the morning after this letter was created, and said, Israel is solely responsible for Hamas's violent acts. Again, Israel had not even mounted a defense at this point, and there were still terrorists running around in the southern part of Israel. And I'm like, Harvard students, 34 Harvard student organizations signed this letter. And I'm like, what is going on? WTF, right? And that's when I went up on campus and I started talking to the faculty. And that's when I started hearing about, actually, Bill, it's this DEI ideology. I'm like, what? DEI, like diversity, equity, inclusion. Obviously I'm familiar with these words, and I see this in the corporate context. And they say, yeah, and they started talking to me about this oppressor-oppressed framework, which is effectively taught on campus and represents the backdrop for many of the courses that are offered and the various some of the studies and other degree offerings. I'm like, I had not even heard of this, and I'm a pretty aware person, but I was completely unaware. And basically, they're like, look, Israel is deemed an oppressor, and the Palestinians are deemed the oppressed, and you take the side of the oppressed, and any acts of the oppressed to dislodge the oppressor, regardless of how vile or barbaric, are okay. I'm like, okay, this is a super dangerous ideology, and really, it's sort of ultimately DEI comes out of a kind of a Marxist socialist backdrop way to look at the world. And so I think there are a lot of issues with it, but unfortunately it's advancing. I ultimately concluded racism as opposed to fighting it, which is what I thought it was ultimately about.
As Bruce Willis said in Die Hard, welcome to the party, pal. So you have to remember, this is a lifelong lefty, and he's just suddenly, and there's many people like him, right? And I'm always trying to open up that door for the lefties who are waking up to start voting differently and thinking about things differently. And this guy is clearly on his way. He basically has left the Democratic Party at this point. He's been going after Biden. Like, he's on his way. But isn't that interesting that a guy who's a really obviously bright billionaire tech guy, liberal, like he's not like some radical lunatic or anything else. It took October 7th for him to wake up and suddenly be like, oh, DEI is bad, right? Like this new age racism actually is bad.